Hey Bayek, it's me Ian, and in today's video we're looking at this. This is The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll from 1960, and what a good year that was. Yep. Yes, and it's a Hammer film again, of course. We can call it a Hammer horror, definitely. But it's an interesting film because this is one that I think there's not a great deal of love for this. It's just seen as a bit of a failure, though I think that's a bit unfair. And when we look into it, you'll see that perhaps people have been a bit harsh on this, Hammer fans in themselves. It's interesting because if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's got 83%. I think some critics realised that this film was better and much better than was perceived. Definitely. It's 88 minutes long, which is the sort of standard time, but did have certain censorship problems, particularly of the sort of certain unsavoury, what was considered unsavoury scenes. Also, language in America had to be changed. Words like damn and hell, just not acceptable. So considered it got the, they were after the X rating, which they consulted with to get. They were cuts that they said were needed. This film on this version is fully restored, which is great, and there is in the extras a look at the censorship and the restored cuts, which is very good to see. The film in America, again, they were in America they weren't, I don't think, very pleased with this film at all. It was changed the name to House of Fright and Jekyll's Inferno. Yes. That's interesting again. This was, I say, a Hammer production, filmed at Bray Studios in Berkshire again. So there we are. It's based on the Robert Louis Stevenson story from 1886, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think actually, again, I'm just reflecting back, I think a lot more people are happy with Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde in terms of looking at Hammer history. They see that as much more innovative, more exciting than this, which I can agree on that to some extent. But that's just a point of interest in this. Its screenplay was written by Wolf Mankiewicz. Are you going to see? At the time, he was considered a real important up-and-coming screenwriter who was seen as a great coup to get. But of course, his vision was perhaps a bit different from the standard Hammer edition. Even though you can argue that this is set in Victorian England, that it perhaps fulfills some of those, Gothic kind of trappings that we get. Far from it in this. It's produced by Michael Carreras again. Again, he's always hoping that we're going to get this, expand the Hammer universe, stretching it out, be more successful. It's also distributed by Columbia. But unfortunately, if we look, it actually was a loss maker. It lost £30,000, which was quite a lot, and was seen a bit of a flop. It needed some success, and Hammer would produce some more success, obviously, in the future. And also they would continue. They still had to complete the sort of universal Gothic styles, which again was a change, which we would get in the up and coming 1961 The Curse of the Werewolf. So that would be interesting, which incidentally Oliver Reed starred in that one. He does make an uncredited appearance in this film, which is interesting. Of course, the director needs no introduction if you're a Hammer fan. Terence Fisher again. And of course, it's a brilliant job. Does Terence Fisher ever do a bad job? Some critics at the time, I don't think again were that keen on him, but he does such a brilliant job. And even now I suspect that there's some people who are not fans. They should be, because a lot of influential directors now recognise what a brilliant job and how innovative he was in many ways with the horror. And that's fantastic. So there's, with Hammer, we always have, I think they're always looking for an actor, a lead actor from, say, America or what have you, or who's got some Hollywood kind of background or things like that. They were always looking for. Well, the lead role is played by Paul Massey. He plays Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's a Canadian actor. A lot of theatrical stuff. He made, I think, about 9 films, and he's very much into theatre. He was at the time, but he came over here and did some of these films, and he was chosen in this. Now, his performance is interesting for the lead character. I mean, he does what he's. He doesn't do a bad job, I'm saying, even though everybody looks at the makeup with the beard and says, well, it does look like a stuck-on beard. And I have to confess, it does at times. But he wanted to play the same, Dr. Jekyll as well as Mr. Hyde. Whereas, I mean, there were consideration of getting 2 actors into it, but no, he wanted to do it. So he did. The female lead is Dawn Adams. She plays Kitty Jekyll, the doctor's wife. Not so loyal wife. Yes, definitely. She's a British actress, but she has an Hollywood background. And she was really doing quite well, but she came here, she did this film. She did appear uncredited in Singing in the Rain, but it's interesting, she was in A King in New York from 1957, which was Charlie Chaplin's last comedy film. And yeah, that's quite a good role to have. It was really. So she's got a good pedigree, and I think she does the role really good. She has that glamour, she has that star quality about the way she plays the role. She's beautiful. She's really good. She plays this role really well, very well. Then I think the next casting is pure genius, but maybe Paul Massey may, in many ways, not feel that, which is Christopher Lee. He plays Paul Allen, and he's a bit of a cad. He's not really a very nice character. But he's quite dominant, in his lead, in his acting. Christopher Lee, he plays this so well. He's like the leading man, even though he isn't the leading man. And I think that shows the quality of him, even though there's certainly, even at this time, there's a reluctance almost about amongst Hammer still to make him the total lead actor in this, but he does command the screen really well, and I think you could almost relish him playing this character. You know, he's a real cad, as they say. You know, he's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely love it. Then we have another interesting actor was David Kossoff. He plays Dr. Little. He's famous in many ways in a lot of early British films and TV, theatre work. And that is, he is a quality actor. Though I think it's interesting that in terms of his career, his son was Paul Kossoff. And Paul Kossoff was in the legendary, brilliant, I say legendary because I think they're fantastic. They were a free classic rock group. But he died in 1976. Such a young age, Paul Kossoff, very talented guitarist. And for the rest of his life, David Kossoff campaigned against drugs. And he talked about this. He did even a stage show about drugs and amazing campaigning that he did in memory, really, of his son. Anyway, I just thought that's an interesting point of view. Sorry, I just wanted to mention something as well, because I always like links. The screenwriter, Wolf Mankiewicz, was originally one of the contributors to the screenplay for Dr. No, the 1962 James Bond film, Dr. No. But he apparently was dissatisfied and had his credits removed from the screenwriting. So there, just thought I'd throw that bit of trivia in. So the film follows the themes that we get in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, I think it's interesting that Terence Fisher puts on this story his certain stamp, because Jekyll is portrayed really as a bland kind of character, and Hyde is a suave, dashing, handsome kind of man who attracts people, especially ladies, and he's that theme of the charm of evil that is there. But this is also about a lot of other things that we see, which Hammer were good at doing. They had the hypocrisy often and sexual oppression, all that, it's all underneath the Victorian society. The gentleman and the, there's almost like this sort of bored respectability, and they're looking for something more and going into the more darker areas. We've seen this in so many different themes. I think of Taste the Blood of Dracula as a great example of a film that actually looks that. And you can see that underlying in these films. But you've also got, which Hammer was always doing, about the mad scientist theme. We get it with the Baron in Frankenstein. And here we get it again with this more blander character who thinks he's, pushing, exploring about personalities. The idea that there's two personalities inside and there's a struggle, and society doesn't allow other personalities, so we get the suppression of that personality, which again can be talked about the sort of the obsession with his obsessions, if you see what I mean. This is that kind of theme. The underlying, you get all the Freudian, Jungian stuff and the sexuality. It's all there. So those themes are quite important to the film. Now, I think another reason why this film, I think some people find the pacing not to their liking. I don't know why, but I rather like it. I think the atmosphere is good. For all, there are faults in this film, but personally, I kind of ignored the faults because I was enjoying it so much. I never let these things bother me if I'm enjoying just getting the atmosphere, and that's what it's about. The atmosphere is really good, but also it can be kind of strange because though we're in Victorian England, we're supposed that it's been pointed out that there's often a very Parisian feel, as we see in this sort of like you nowadays you'd call it a nightclub. It wasn't this area where people meet, this club entertainment establishment where you get all these rich people going, but you've got the snake act. The erotic nature of that is very strong, but it is very sort of French, and certainly the dancing bit is almost like it's can dancing. And then the colours have been pointed out. You get a lot of pink, purple, greens. These are seen as very much those kind of in French cinema colours, that are used in some of their films of that sort of ilk, which is again very interesting. Getting that, it's not a Hammer thing as well. This is what I mean. You've got elements like in the script that are very not Hammer, and this is that very much so. I think that's where people really attack the film, because they don't feel it's totally a Hammer script. But it in a way it has got, as I've just discussed a bit earlier about some of the themes in it, are very much Hammer. And of course with Terence Fisher there, he was able to bring out these themes. So it may not be your typical Gothic style, but there's a lot of the familiar Hammer elements in here. And I personally think it's an heroic failure, but it isn't a failure to me. I don't think it's a failure, but that's how you would describe it, I think, because it's not your typical Hammer film in its style. But I think that's a positive thing, to be honest. Yes, it did, obviously, in terms of audience and the public and the censorship, it's, quite a poor performance, really, for the film. Losing all that money, the enthusiasm, I don't think, particularly in America, wasn't, getting all the censorship problems. So in that sense, there's that hanging over this film, and that's why it's probably being dismissed as much. But here we have, in this Indicator, brilliant job again they do, 2019, this fantastic release. As you can see, there we are. That's great. I love this cover. This cover's great. And then there's the back, and we've got all these extras again, and the extras are great. The documentary, fantastic. Interviews are great. And there we've got the great disc on there, and then advertising. It's just I highly recommend this. Especially you can pick it up in sales if you can pick it up. I think I'm very happy to have this in my collection, and it's something that I will watch more in the future, definitely. I really like it. I really believe, when I say this, I never dislike Hammer films. The style, everything. I can always find something good. And this one, I'm very happy to have. So there you are. There's my review. Right. So, if you're new here, haven't subscribed, well, why not? Because I will then, well, it lets you know that I'm producing more of these videos. You can't say further than that, and it costs note. Also, if you like it, well, give it a like, because then more people might get to see it and enjoy it, and algorithms and all that stuff, and it's all free. You can't say further than that, can you? Man, you can't. So, all I've got to say is, I'll see thee again.